Hi, Ed Marks here. Welcome to Ed Talks. And I have a friend who's our special
Hello.
guest today. And it's Pooja. Pooja, welcome to Ed Talks.
Thank you, Ed. Glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking the opportunity to spend time with us because we're going to talk about a topic that all of us deal with at least once in our career. And if you haven't, you will. And so the fact that you're willing to be transparent about it is pretty cool. And so we are going to talk about pivoting in our career. So
Yeah.
you're in the middle of it. It's not going to last very long. So I thought I'd grab you while I could. So what I want to do is talk about first how we first met. So we've known each other for a few years now, and it's really through your time at Vizient where we've met and had an opportunity to meet up because we're both in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, and so we've had a chance to meet up a few times and just learn from one another and career and all that kind of stuff. So it's been really great, and I had an opportunity to almost work together with you as well. And so it's been really nice in that way. So that's really how we've met. And so we continue that relationship. The question I have for you is tell us about a great customer experience you've had recently.
Yeah. Well, that's a unique question. And normally I always answer Nordstrom's, the best customer service. But lately, and since you asked customer experience, I'll say I joined with some of the free time that I have, Orange Theory, the fitness
Yeah.
game. You heard about it? Well, I will say after the pandemic, I was not big in going to the gym. I was more doing stuff at home. And so I decided, why not, get some accountability. So I joined Orange Theory. They had a free class. And I was floored with just the amount of customer experience they showed in onboarding me, right? Like having some real talk about what will happen, proactively telling me, like, this, you may not understand all the jargon, do not worry about it, buddying me up with like another more veteran, person that came to the gym so that I had a great first class experience. And then the coach, the trainer, got
Yeah.
taking extra attention, making sure I was in the right place where she would stand. So I had the right first experience. I was just amazed by all that designed experience that obviously converted me to their paid customers. So they were successful.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you brought that up, and I hope I'm not stealing any thunder from you and what we might talk about, but I think working out, like when you're doing, you should always, I'm a big believer, always do it, but
Yes.
especially I think during career pivots, like is really
Yes.
important, right, to take care of yourself in many aspects.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think I've enjoyed that part. And I would say I learned a lot about what healthcare can learn from this customer experience. Honestly, we throw a lot of jargon at people in healthcare. We do a lot of just non-onboarding and, patients don't know what to expect. And I'm like, this is amazing. And this is something we could bring to our own work and personal lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to that in a lot of ways.
What's one thing that your parents forced you to do when you were a kid and you probably did an eye roll, but now that you're an adult, you're like, I'm kind of glad they made me do that.
Oh, wow. That's a good question. My parents were just here over the holidays and we were reminiscing. So I guess what comes to mind is this one thing my parents would say. They have two daughters, right? So when we were raised in India, so you know how the Indian customs work, passing down jewelry and gold and all that wealth is a big deal. But my parents were, I think, really ahead of their generation and times. They were always like, no, for us, your education is your wealth. I mean, they just always said, we don't care if you can get one less jewelry, but like your education is your wealth.
Yeah.
And they bought this really expensive at the time World Book Encyclopedia. And those people knocking at the door, and nobody'd ever seen that in India, and this like golden pages in it. I mean, very, very expensive, huge set. And everybody was like, why would you purchase this? And we were just reminiscing on this, and my parents were like, "No, this is my investment. Like this is their gold and jewelry,." And I can look back and say, "Boy, they were right. They forced me every time I had a question to go open the World Book, get the ROI from that investment. Go find the answers there." And it sparked such a love for reading and my curiosity for just learning new things. that it served me really well. It's like, could you just answer the question? No, go to old book. And now I've become this independent woman who loves reading.
Yeah, well, and there's something too. I remember those encyclopedias as well. And I know that when I was bored or I'd always try to be the first in class, which was a mistake to finish something, they'd always make me grab one and sort of read through it. And I'm all about online and digital, and I know you are as well. And I know
Yep.
we've got Google and we can look anything up, but there's nothing, you're not going to sit there on Google and flip through pages, you know? There's
Right.
nothing like that. And I was just thinking back that, man, I think I credit whatever intelligence I do have from all the hours just flipping through that thing, just
Yeah,
random.
it's the serendipitous like things you find, right? Yeah, absolutely.
So, Pooja, we know a little bit about you already because you shared that you were raised in India or born in India. Tell us a little bit more about your story, personal and professional.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, I was born and raised in India, in a huge household near aunts and uncles and grandparents. And we immigrated, just my parents, myself, and my sister in 2001 to the United States. We moved to Chicago, actually. So my first experience with the cold winters and snow, coming from the warm, dry Gujarat, weather in India. But I actually decided to go to electrical engineering. I kind of loved science, physics. My dad was an electrical engineer and decided, why not? I'm going to take the hardest major out there and crush it. And so I did, got a 4.0, but through the process, got a co-op at Medtronic where I could apply the principles of EE into biomedical research and save lives. And so I did pacemaker research, got a cool patent out of it. But again, realized, wow, I love the fact that I'm innovating. I'm working in a cross-functional team. I'm thinking about this research and how to build something for India and China. But my curiosity is actually more around how they're going to take this to market, and how they're going to make a business out of it than building the circuits. And so I actually pulled back my master's application from electrical engineering. I was accepted, but I finished my bachelor's at Northwestern and said, I'm actually going to pivot and move to McKinsey, and get my mini MBA, if you will, as a business analyst, as a consultant. But I stuck to healthcare. I mean, the stuff I loved at Medtronic in my first job was that healthcare is a great, great industry, lots of scope for innovation. So I've not left healthcare since, but as we'll talk about, I've done a lot of different roles within healthcare, be it at consulting at McKinsey or after I went to my business school degree at Harvard Business School, really going into more general management roles in healthcare services companies. But on the personal side, as I went to business school, I got married. My husband Tushar and I met through a mutual friend and at a temple, and we've kind of raised a family here now in Dallas. My son is 8, my daughter is 6. And so while balancing that, I've been sort of moving around the healthcare provider industry, through DaVita, Adeptus, and now Vizient, and really doing a variety of roles in general management, strategy, and operations. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. And I think you're right on that whole McKinsey to start your career working at an organization like that. Yeah, it is like another MBA, right? And
Yes.
what a great opportunity. You've had an amazing career and you're still very young in your career. What role, like if you had to pick one, I know they're all great, but if you had to pick one, what perhaps was the most informative?
I'd have to say, I mean, given the really informative role the Medtronic Co-op had, in my life to make me understand my true strength, but also my true passion. You don't have to go to school and then have to stick to that, right? That was very informative about me. So I kind of mentioned that already, but if I had to pick another one, your failures are sometimes your biggest kind of learning lessons too. And at DaVita RX and at Adaptus both, I was building businesses that ultimately couldn't scale because certain regulations didn't pan out the way they, like in the case of the bundle, the ESRD bundle got pushed out to 2024. So we had to shut that down. In the case of Adaptus, certain regulations didn't allow us to scale the freestanding ER business. And I learned a really hard lesson about really understanding the regulations. and the economics and the hydraulics and the policies around a business, especially in a business like healthcare. Um, because you can do everything right, but if that doesn't exist, it's going to fail. Your incentives are not aligned to succeed. So I learned a really good, important lesson that I've carried.
Yeah, no, that's really good. What about one or two things that you're most proud of, your accomplishments that you've been able to achieve? I know you have a ton of them, but just for the sake of brevity, I'll have to keep you to one or two.
Yeah, well, I'll start with actually a personal one, if that's okay, and
Yeah,
then
of
a professional
course.
one. So, I volunteer a lot at my temple here, and one accomplishment I think the whole Indian community is really proud of. In October, we inaugurated this large Indian temple in Robbinsville, New Jersey. My husband and I had a great privilege and advantage of volunteering there. Actually, through the last 5 years, we have worn hard hats and gone and volunteered, and we're like in the making, quite literally, of this huge monument and temple that you can't believe is outside of India, right? And to be able to, in my lifetime, contribute to something that is so long lasting for generations to come, like leaving my legacy, my values, my
Yeah,
culture for future generations, is really cool accomplishment. I had to share that.
yeah,
And on the professional side, I think I've talked to you about Vizian's transformation, and I had this very unique opportunity to lead the enterprise transformation for about 2.5 years, where I had to pick an internal team, build it from the scratch, and like figure out what our playbook's going to be in transforming Vizian's operating model, processes, incentives, go-to-market approaches. And what I loved about it is not the actual deliverables, but the process of building a team and building a culture that had so much psychological safety that we were able to have tough conversations, be there for each other, like collaborate with the whole company, get them involved, give them a platform to bring their ideas to us, and really create that learning culture that is so hard to create, that I'm just proud of me and my team
yeah.
to be that open, to be that vulnerable, and create that for ourselves. So that was a really cool experience and accomplishment to be able to
Yeah, and when I could testify again, because I've known you for a while, and I know your work at Vizient, it's just what great things that you've done in your career, and especially there. So let's transition to career pivots, because I know you have listeners who either are in one, have been in one, or they probably will be in one. That's just the nature of business, in our day and age. And so tell us about your pivot and how you handle it.
Yeah, and so, a little bit of what I said about the kinds of pivots I've made. My pivots have always been of different nature, right? Different times called for different types of pivots and different reasons for pivots. So I'll definitely say there's different themes. And so I'll summarize it briefly. Like, I went from engineering to consulting, from consulting to like corporate, so like a whole different work environment, from corporate strategy to general management, like again, a whole different function. And then from general management to, back to strategy, and then back to general management, right? After transformation at Mizian. So what I've learned is you could pivot within different parts of healthcare. So like I've done, kind of provider, med device, pharma, retail pharma, like that gives you a lot of variety, a lot of learning, a lot of like appreciation for how things are connected to one another. As much as you think they're different parts of healthcare, they're all connected in this huge value chain. So actually pivoting, and sometimes you're forced to pivot, sometimes you pivot because a great opportunity comes along. So I've had both. I've had layoffs at Adeptus. I had, change in my role and position, and restructuring at Vizient. But I've also had other opportunistic roles, like,
Right.
oh, here's a better title and a better role. Like, let's go jump ship. So again, like you may move for different reasons, but what I've done really well is sort of think about how I'm building my knowledge set about all these different parts of the healthcare ecosystem and how they all connect. Because ultimately, it makes me a richer, more interconnected, dynamic, kind of complex thinker. And then on the flip side, and the functional side, people, this is hard. And I think it's really easy said than done to flip between strategy and operations, back to
Yeah.
strategy, back to operations. As much as I wish people did more of it, it's hard. But I became a better operator as a result of doing strategy first, right? Because I was always an enterprise thinker. I was always like connecting the dots and able to lead through influence, because that's what you do in strategy. You don't own anything, right? You just have to lead through influence. Well, when you then come to the operator side, you know it, Ed, like doing digital transformation, you still have to lead through influence. And so I've actually brought a lot of the skills I learned in strategy to operations, and it's made me a better leader for it. So for everybody out there that's like thinking of pivoting or is pivoting, I would say be open-minded about even thinking about this variety as a strength. It's
Yes.
not a weakness. It's not like you're lost. Like these are actually adding to your toolkit and your ability to be differentiated and more holistic and diverse in your thinking.
No, that's really good counsel. And like you said, whether it's a pivot, an intentional pivot, or you're caught in a corporate layoff or something,
Yeah.
think diverse. Don't just go down the same path you were because you're comfortable with it, or you think that's the only thing you might be hired for. But consider jumping back and forth between strategy and operations and things like that, or different verticals completely, like
Yep.
you're suggesting. That's a really, I think it makes for a richer experience, and I think it does make you more marketable.
Yes.
Long term. So
Yes.
those
And
are
you talk a lot about innovation. Ideas come from the outside. And sometimes pivots force you, especially when you make a true pivot, they force you to be humble because you are an outsider now, right? Like you're gonna have these beginner's mind and you're gonna have this humility, but from that comes innovation and some really cool new ideas.
yeah. Well, what I loved about it is, as hard as that is, where you're the new person and you're forced to reestablish credibility and the humility, you don't know nearly what everyone else knows. In some ways, it just helps you develop as a person and as a professional, because when you're someplace, I know some people won't like this, but if you're someplace for your entire career for a long, long time, it limits you a little bit. When you're forced to go make that pivot and go somewhere else as that new person, it forces you have to prove yourself again, which is a good thing. Um,
Yeah.
you have to demonstrate, excellence, all that kind of stuff. So, anyways,
Yeah.
I think pivots are healthy. Now, speaking of healthy, we talked about one best practice already for a pivot. So, and that was sort of wellness, like at least physical wellness, but there's also the mental wellness. So, working out is really a good idea. What are there any other sort of what you might consider a best practice for, like, if you find yourself in a pivot, that you should take advantage of during that time?
Yes, yes, I've been actually pretty using my agile learning lab approaches, Ed, from our digital transformation world to my career search. As weird as it sounds, I'm doing mini experiments. Okay, so another best practice could be try something that you can do, like micro experiments, right? Speak to an audience you normally wouldn't speak to. So I just did a little speech, a little presentation to a friend's team. She does life sciences consulting, and that's an adjacency, but they were curious about digital trends and healthcare trends. So I'm doing these mini experiments to be exposed to different environments, different roles, different people, different network, and diversifying. But in the process, it's helping me really identify what's my curiosity leaning towards. Like, where am I really getting excited? Where am I like, maybe not, And so, yeah, meet different people, try different things. I'm advising a startup that's like going from 0 to 1. Again, a size of a company that's so small that I've never really worked at before. But as an advisor, it's a low stakes way to experiment, right? And same thing, I'm going to be in a pitch competition as a judge,
Yeah.
for startups. So, like, these are kinds of things, interesting, curious, different creative ways to experiment. Second is lean in on your network, personal and professional. And and this is where I go back to our relationship. I mean, we met maybe what 2 3 times. I mean, it's not like we've worked for years and years, but it's people like you and others that have really been generous with their time and expertise and support. And so sometimes, we tend to underestimate like our network being just the people that really worked with us, knew us, could do a reference for us, but it's been really broad. It's been partners, suppliers, people I met at a business school networking event. I mean, literally, it could be as wide as a one dinner interaction, and people have been super generous. So I've taken the time now to have lunches and dinners
Yeah.
and really invest in my network and give back. And through that, again, learn a lot about myself. And then the third final tip I'd give is do the hard work of sitting with yourself and journaling
Mm.
all of the stuff that you're learning about yourself and like your emotions. And initially that helped me process the pivot, right? Like you have to let go of a few things. You have to, there's a sense of loss, which is super natural. We don't talk about it, but we should, and we should journal about it. But then it also helped me pivot to what do I really want? What is this phase really telling me? What's important to me now? And I'm working with a coach that's grilling me to distill my career ingredients, as she calls it. And so, yeah, I'm going to prioritize my career ingredients. And in my pivot, her mantra is it's more about who you become in your career rather than what you do. So for the first time, I'm really incorporating my values, my role as a mother and a daughter-in-law and a wife, along with all my career aspirations, because I'm ambitious, into like searching for what's next. So that's the third tip I'd share that I've been practicing.
Yeah, no, those are really good. And sort of tangential to one that you mentioned in terms of networking, I've seen
Yeah.
you at conferences as well. So you're still completely immersed, completely engaged. And I think that's helpful as well. It goes back to the mental side of things a little bit and the
Yes.
networking. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you give back. You realize, I mean, I met with so many startups at Vive, and just we ended up talking. The one was in a space that I was in before, and I ended up giving them some advice. And everybody took some value out of me. And it's like, you know what? You feel good about yourself. Like my skills are not going stale. I am still valuable. And the networking, to your
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, and that reminds me of another one. And again, we're just trying to be super practical here for our audience,
Yes.
is that continued growth. And so whether it's on LinkedIn or there's different online platforms where you could and should just continue your growth. And like you were suggesting with many experiences or experiments, is try something new. Like I wish I had a couple hours, a few hours to learn Gen AI, as an
Well, I've been doing
example.
that. Yes. I have been like experimenting, which is why the Fireflies.ai app just showed up when we first joined this call. So yeah, I've been experimenting AI
Yeah.
in note taking, in summarizing, in slide making, because I have the time in itinerary production for my kids for next vacation. So absolutely, new skill development, good
Yeah.
time to do. Yep.
No, that's awesome. Well, you're a great leader too. So I want to make sure we get a question or two in on leadership so that
Yes.
again, just adding value to everyone who's watching. How do you manage your life? So as you mentioned, you're ambitious, you have a family, and you have this great career. So how have you found it, sort of the best way to manage everything?
Yeah, well, I have to start with it takes a village. I mean, I could not have been who I am, done what I did without the support of my husband, my parents, my in-laws. We consciously made certain trade-offs when I was looking for my career choices, so that we would settle in Dallas, so that we would have that ecosystem of my in-laws, and my husband obviously made conscious trade-offs in his career, so he had more flexibility to be able to support my growing family. And so that is by far, I think, the biggest contributor to my success, and I think any leader's success is the support system at home. But the other one is I read this book early on when I was a young mom. I think it was even before I had my first kid, but maybe I was pregnant and just really overwhelmed with how I was going to fit all these new responsibilities in my life. It's called Essentialism. I don't know if you've read it. And this, as a type A leader and a type A just student, and Indian mentality, especially as a elder sibling, you can imagine now, like, everything makes sense, right? Like, you can psychoanalyze me now. I was all about getting A's, right? And this book says, what are you going to get B's and C's in, right? For the first time, I was forced to ask myself, what am I going to get a B and a C in? And that it's okay to get B's and C's in certain things. So not having perfection, get in the way of good and done has been a learned skill, for me, and especially as a parent, I've had to just drop certain balls that hopefully weren't important ones, and get B's and C's, in a lot of things, so that I'm getting A's on the big rocks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good counsel. And where do you go for inspiration?
I told you I'm an avid reader, so a lot of times books inspire me, but more specifically, I'm very spiritual. There's a lot of strength in our Hindu scriptures, that kind of builds me internally from a strength perspective and humility perspective. There's a lot of strength in that. So I do a lot of spiritual reading at night. I read about different Hindu role models, my spiritual leaders who have led through compassion and humility and service. And I bring that into the type of leader I want to be at home as a parent, but also at work. And so that inspires me. And then the volunteering I do at the temple too. Like there's a spiritual bend, yes. But honestly, the service side of things, when I see other people contribute to a cause larger than them, again, sacrificing and volunteering their time and talent and seeing that humility, it's very inspiring. So like also I learn a lot from these fellow volunteers that I volunteer with. So yeah, again, not a work answer, but sometimes those are the places I go to for a totally unadulterated like set of, inspirations that are resonant with my values.
That's awesome. No, that's really good because again, going back to the pivot, we covered a lot of these different areas. The to make sure you take care of yourself mentally,
Yes.
physically, and spiritually as well.
Yep.
But this has been fascinating. I know this is going to be super helpful, Pooja. I really appreciate the fact that you've been willing to share and be transparent. Is there anything that we may have missed or anything that you want to double down on? I give you the last word.
I think the last word would be have faith. I mean, I think in doing pivots, your faith becomes really important. And it's not just faith in like spiritual sense, but faith in yourself, faith in your network, faith in
Yeah.
every setback is actually there for a reason. Like it's happening to make you grow, to make you maybe open a door that you never thought existed. So the importance of faith is there. So as I look to do, again, innovate and contribute to healthcare next, I know that this time is a good reset. Like it's only going to make me more powerful and strong and rested in what I tackle next. So, enjoy that time to rest and be faithful. The right thing will come along.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up, Pooja, this particular episode of Ed Talks. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me.
All right. That wraps up Ed Talks. Thanks for listening.